come and take their seats, we'll go ahead and get started this evening. First of all, we want to thank you very much for taking time to engage in this process. My name's Rebecca Ward, the Planning Director with Park City, and it's been really exciting to see the turnout and the interest with our community meetings in July, October, and then this is our final community meeting in this project. That doesn't mean that the engagement process ends. The next step will be drafting a small area plan for this Bonanza Park neighborhood and then bringing that to the Planning Commission and the City Council with more opportunities to weigh in through public hearings and providing input there. So we are here tonight specifically to look at the 200 acres within the Bonanza Park neighborhood, and that includes Snow Creek. It includes everything between Kearns and Deer Valley Drive, and then a portion of the properties east of Bonanza Drive. And where we are in developing the future land use and connectivity vision for the redevelopment of this neighborhood, we know we'll have a lot of redevelopment coming up with existing properties in the area, and this is an exciting time to really step back as a community and envision what the future of this neighborhood will look like. And within the 200 acres, we have the very popular 5-acre site that's owned by the city, where there's also a feasibility study that is in process to see what the future of those 5 acres will look like. And where we are this evening is to focus on the big picture, the 200 acres, and the decisions that are made about this neighborhood as a whole will influence the future of the 5-acre site. So again, we really appreciate you taking time to be here and to participate in this process. We have a really great consultant team that has helped us through this, and I will turn it over to David with Future IQ.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. All right, good evening, everybody. So welcome, first of all, and I got to say, great to see so many people who've been at previous sessions, right? So the continuity of us walking through these 3 big community engagement phases where we've talked about vision, we started to sort of get broad brushstrokes of what do you want to see in this area, and tonight you're going to get a chance to really get into the nuts and bolts. So part of the material we're going to present in here will be sort of getting into the technical details, sort of design principles and so on, and the team from MKSK is going to really walk us through that. It's going to be pretty dense, right? So just to warn you, get comfortable, right? So there's a lot of material because there's a lot of really important issues to go through. We're going to post this slide deck and the recording of tonight. That'll go into the website. That'll be up in the next couple of days, so you'll be able to go back and review that material. But we do want to give a proper job and walk you through this, so we don't want to rush through the details. So we're going to take about 50 minutes, maybe 60 minutes to walk through that, and then we want to give you a chance to come next door into the community room, and we're going to be there for about an hour and a half, and there's a chance for you to kind of put, we've got sort of at the point where it's like nuanced. Do we do this, or this? These kind of sort of versions of different approaches, right? Around green spaces and connectivity and housing and development and so on. And we want to get your input on that as the final piece of large-scale community input into this really important 200-acre area. And as Rebecca said, this is we know it's a really important part of this community, and the decisions that get made there and the direction you drive it will shape the character of that area and its purpose and its function for you as residents going forward for decades, right? So really important work. And we obviously appreciate your input in this so far. So in terms of tonight's work, we want to share with you some of the sort of draft work of where we've got to, what it's starting to look like. So obviously you've had a lot of input, and that translates into sort of design concepts and principles and language, so we want to share that with you. And then we obviously want to start drafting the more detailed vision for trail and pedestrian connectivity, and then obviously we want to get your input next door. So a bit of a process update, just very quickly where we're at. We're at the sort of final stages of, as I said, this sort of input gathering. And we're getting pretty close to, I think, getting a really good picture of what the future of this area is going to look like. In terms of engagement, so the first couple of phases, just so pleasing to have a lot of different voices. We're almost at 1,500 people in total who weighed in on surveys or come to these meetings. And I would guess, looking around, I don't know everybody personally, but I would guess that there's a kind of a cohort of 50 or 60 people who've really been at every one of these sessions, right? And I think that provides a really important continuity of thinking from the community as we go through this process. So thank you for your dedication. In terms of key findings, and this is where we get to the summation of what we've really discovered in these first couple of phases. So one, density is really an issue. I mean, we know that, and you as a community deal with that every way you turn. Every decision in front of council is in some way or other, has a component about density or something connected to that. What we've heard is that there is a willingness to support additional density in parts of Bonanza Park in that 200 acres, but you expect trade-offs for that. It's not just all density. We'll have some density, but if that gives us some of the important amenities we want as a community. Connectivity has been a really big deal. Right from the walking tours and all the surveys, all the sort of dots on maps and everything. Right now it's a bit of a black hole, the whole Bonanza Park area. The trails don't connect properly and so on. So sorting that out is a really high priority. And the third big part is sort of an intentional locals for locals, or local for locals. So this is your area, and people want to see that focus on your needs. And I think people recognise that, visitors are going to come and use this area, but what we've heard from the community is you want the focus to be on amenities that serve you and your life. In terms of vision, we've talked about Bonanza Park as a neighbourhood where you gather to dine, shop, express local art and culture. And the vision for the future is to really enhance the vibrancy of that, to become more walkable, more connected, more livable, inclusive of the community for current and future residents. And then we get to this, which is, here's the broad sort of project goals. I'm just going to frame this and then I'll hand this to Louise to walk us through the detail. So most of tonight is going to be building out detail around each of these 6 key sort of lenses or goals. So one is mixed use. Clearly there's a need to create mixed use neighbourhood with livability in mind, and we'll talk a lot about that. Local, supporting local, so local businesses, local ownership. We've heard a lot of that through the engagement process. The user-friendly, that whole issue about being able to sort of move around that area in a very sensible way. Inclusive, so making sure that we consider housing as a component of what happens there. Green, and the green part actually was one that was added actually. It was really came out of, I think, of our, the first big community engagement session where people really talked about the importance of focusing on a sustainable component. And then, of course, there's the very important cultural component. So where people have talked a lot about having this sort of overlay or a lens or a theme or an expression of arts and culture in that area, that's part of the value proposition of the Bonanza Park area. So that's where we've got to. So Louise, I want to hand it to you to walk us through the detail.
Thanks, David, and good evening, everyone. My name is Luis Calvo. I'm an urban planner with MKSK, and I've had the pleasure of being the project manager for this project. I recognize a lot of the faces today, as David was saying, so it's great to see you all again. I'm going to walk us through the first 3 goals from the 6 goals that David walked us through. So as you all review the plan, which I know everyone else here will, you'll notice that the plan is organized by these 6 project goals. Under each goal, you'll find recommendations with a little bit more detail on how to realize that goal. I'll walk us through some of the recommendations tonight, and then following our presentation, we'll go outside to the community rooms, and you'll be able to give us feedback on these recommendations so we can refine them into a final document. The first goal that we'll walk us through is mixed use, and that's Bonanza Park is mixed use. Like David said, there's a lot of support for additional development and growth and density, but it's as a trade-off for things that benefit the community and benefit local residents. The vision for Bonanza Park as mixed use is a mixed use neighborhood that is livable, and livable for those who live here, for those who shop here, and for park guides. The recommendations for making a more mixed-use Bonanza Park include creating a mixed-use district, updating the zoning to better reflect a growth strategy for a mixed-use neighborhood, updating the frontage protection zone to make sure that that growth continues to preserve view corridors that are very important that you all told us about, and then establishing development guidelines for the new development so it looks and feels authentic to Park City and it reflects an architectural quality to it. So, like all planning processes, we have to talk a little bit about zoning. Generally, the area of Bonanza Park, the study area that you see on the screen, is zoned general commercial. That is a more auto-centric zoning type that's built, that reflects a little bit of the area today. So it reflects the kind of the commercial uses that are there today, the surface parking lots and such. As we have engaged with you all, you have told us the opportunity to create a more walkable and interconnected neighborhood. Unfortunately, the current zoning is not well suited for that. So how do we get to that vision for growth? We have to facilitate it, and we have to make sure that the regulating documents on the city side match the aspirations of the community. So for that, we are suggesting a new zoning district called a mixed-use district, a Bonanza Park mixed-use district, that encompasses the study area, the Bonanza Park study area that we've been addressing, with the exclusion of the frontage protection zone here shown in the orange. What can a mixed-use district do for you all? It can allow for increased densities, it can allow for more development, but it can do so in a way that's more reflective of your sensitivity. So it can address things like adjacencies to nearby areas, it can address things like the types of uses that we'd like to encourage, and it can also address things like context. As we think through a mixed-use zoning, we want to think through a couple of big things. I'll go through some of the three main aspects of it. The first is expanding the categories of what residential is allowed. Currently, the residential uses in a general commercial are conditional. That means that people have to apply for them, but are not by right. There's an opportunity to expand to more different types of housing, but also to make them by right. We also have the opportunity to introduce vertical zoning standards. So if we want a mixed-use district that is walkable and people enjoy, moving through without a car, then that starts at the ground level. That's not just the use itself. So there are opportunities in a zoning district to incorporate that. And lastly, there's an opportunity to think through building heights in a way that's reflective of your priority. So in conversations with you all, we understand the sensitivities to building heights. So we're suggesting that the zoning district continues the base height of 35 feet that is completely unchanged from the current zoning district. However, some of you all told us that you'd like to see opportunities for increasing building heights, and you'd like to see a strong market reflect opportunities for the development side to provide a few things that you all think is important. So for that, we are including the recommendation to suggest a density bonus. So a density bonus is a tool used across the country, communities of various sizes, as big as New York and LA to as small as really small towns. And the opportunity here, it's a tool that permits developers to build more housing units in exchange for something. So there's the bonus aspect of it. Density bonuses come in different forms. You can reduce your setback requirements, so therefore you have more site to build in. You can reduce your parking requirements, so you can have more building versus less parking. And you can also increase your building heights. So there's opportunities for increasing building heights, but some of you all told us that you'd like to see increased building heights come as a trade-off for things that the community prioritizes and would like to see in Bonanza Park. We have seen examples across the country in different communities where there's opportunities, and you already do this with affordable housing, where a developer comes in and provides affordable housing that's considered a community benefit. And in exchange for that, you allow for certain things like the three tools that I mentioned before. However, there are communities that are a little bit more holistic about density bonuses and provide more categories than affordable housing. For that, we have established kind of a menu of what we're calling community benefits. And those are things that you all told us you want and are important to you, and things that you can use as an incentive for the development community to come in, invest in these, and then perhaps receive something in return in the form of a density bonus. These can vary, and this is something that will be a next step implementation, but it can be things like adding outdoor community spaces, increasing connectivity, adding underground parking, improving transit stops, adding things like community facilities or sustainable, or making this a sustainable development. We want to hear from you all at the tables on what one of these are important. And how does this work? So in the form of a community bonus, a developer would come in, they would propose a development site, then they would provide certain community benefits, and then using a points-based system, which we've seen other communities do, or some sort of other mechanism, they would apply for the density bonus that would take them up from 35 feet to 45 feet, not unlike what you already do with your affordable master plan development. Some of you all, not all of you, but some of you all told us there's some appetite for building heights that are even above 4 stories. If that is the case, we have the opportunity to consider what we're calling exceptional community benefits. These are benefits that go above and beyond what a developer is expected to produce. We want to hear from you all if this is a trade-off that you all would consider having over at the boards. If you would consider it, you can add things more than affordable housing, like increasing connectivity, have a transit-oriented development, improving your transit stops, and having a net zero development. Again, this is something that is under consideration. It's not a formal recommendation yet, and it's something that we want to hear from you all. You've noticed that I've added a few staggering of the volumes here for some of the building masses that we're showing. That's because some of the things that, as we improve as we increase building heights, as we update the zoning, as development occurs, there's also the possibility that it'll impact some of the view corridors and some of those key views into Park City. We recognize that this is very important for folks, and because of that, we want to recommend some improvements to the frontage protection zone. For those that you all are not familiar with it, the frontage protection zone is a 100-foot buffer on key corridors coming into Park City, which in the study area includes Kearns Boulevard, Park Avenue, and Deer Valley Drive. There are opportunities to update the frontage protection zone, so you add things like requiring trail or sidewalk connectivity, so the first 30 feet of a site development looks more like a linear green with really great trails and sidewalks. There's an opportunity to restrict building heights to 35 feet for the first 50 feet of your frontage protection zone. So no matter what the building height is on the zoning district, the first 50 feet of a view corridor is always 35 feet. But there's also the opportunity to require upper story step backs in 10-foot increments for buildings within that area. That way you can stagger some of the building heights, so when you're at the ground level, it doesn't look like kind of a wall of building. It can look a little bit more graceful and coming into the area. And lastly, you can establish development guidelines to make sure that the architectural quality of new development matches the expectations that you all have as a community. Things like looking at front yards, landscaping, windows, doors, roofs. These are things that can be incorporated into a zoning district, and these are things that other communities with a strong development market can accomplish. So what can this look like? It can look in a variety of different ways. We have just a few visualizations to show what 4-story development, and I'm adding a light transparency of a 5-story there, could look like on some of those key corridors. This is at the intersection of Iron Horse Boulevard and Bonanza Drive. These are purely conceptual. These are massing studies, and they do not show architecture, but it shows you the impact of taking a building that's currently a single or 2 stories and making that a 4-story development, what that looks like. This is the same condition on Park Avenue and Woodbine Way. You can see how that impacts some of the transition into the city. And then on Kearns Boulevard and Homestake Road, what that does to, change or perhaps even improve the entry experience as you make updates to the frontage protection zone, require things like landscaping, trees, sidewalks, or trails, and then step back some of the building heights so you can have things like balconies and terraces and some greenery on them as development occurs. The second goal is local. So Bonanza Park is local. From the very beginning, you all told us this is a neighborhood for locals, and you'd like to see that continue. For that, there are several opportunities that we can do as a community. The first one is, recognizing the elephant in the room, and that's nightly rentals and hotels and timeshares. You all told us that there's opportunities to limit some of that in the neighborhood and make it more of a residential community. There's also, retail and commercial square footages. So what are opportunities there to strengthen regulations to make sure that businesses coming in are more reflective of Park City? One of this is to limit conventional chain businesses and to cap commercial square footages to a certain size. So for nightly rentals and hospitality, this is obviously something that is addressed citywide, but there are opportunities to do this at the neighborhood level through council kind of consideration. You can do things like in a rezoning, you can make major hotels a conditional use rather than making it by right, while still allowing for minor boutique hotel uses, which are much smaller, a by right use. You can establish limit on nightly rentals, and there's a variety of different ways that communities nationwide do this. You don't have to do it in a particular way. There's not a magic formula for it, but you can do things like you do a cap on the number of nightly rentals in the neighborhood. You could limit the number of nights a property can be rented. You can even limit the number of tenants. Again, this is something that council should consider, and that would be through kind of an ordinance level. And you can also establish promising limiting investor-owned nightly rentals. So folks who have nightly rentals are primary homeowners. Second, you can limit conventional chain businesses. A lot of us rely on chain businesses for many things. I go to Target. It's a thing that we need to do every now and then. But you all told us that Bonanza Park has to reflect the values of the local community, and the businesses should do the same. There are opportunities that other communities have done, which include limiting chain businesses into the neighborhood. And you all already have a definition of what a chain store is citywide. You can incorporate that into your zoning and make sure that you restrict some of those uses into new development while not impacting existing businesses. And lastly, you can cap commercial square footages in new development as well, where you can limit some of the sizes of individual tenants and some of the percentages of how much commercial per building is included. This would preclude some of those larger chain businesses from coming in because you don't have necessarily the size that they would require. And again, these are all strategies, and the plan will add a little bit more detail to them. The third goal is user-friendly, and like David was saying, there's a lot of emphasis on connectivity and a lot of emphasis on making this a more walkable neighborhood. So for that, there are several strategies. The first is to establish a future network of pedestrian and bicycle linkages. We know that it's very hard to move through the study area by foot or by bicycle. It is not an easy task. You have to make a lot of decisions, some of which include crossing through parking lots. So what are the opportunities to make a better network? When you consider development proposals, as they come in, you can encourage connections through Bonanza Park for pedestrian, cyclists, and even automobiles. You can leverage that future development to fund and implement some of your mobility improvements. Some of these things are very expensive, costly, especially things like connections to nearby communities. So what are some development tools that you all can include so the development community chips into some of that? And lastly, you can create a vibrant and pedestrian-oriented neighborhood by restricting some of those auto-centric uses that are known to restrict walkability. So all great neighborhoods start with sidewalks and streets. And you all told us that some of the sidewalk gaps in the neighborhood need to be addressed first. So that is a key priority in the plan. However, there's also the opportunity to highlight some great trail connectivity within the neighborhood. We have great trails along Snow Creek Drive and north of Kearns. We have the rail trail on the perimeter of the study area. However, moving and connecting between these two and through Bonanza Park, that is a tough task. That is something that is not easy or intuitive to do. What are the opportunities here? So I'm showing here in orange the opportunity for what we're calling a signature trail. And a signature trail is really a very nice trail, not unlike the rail trail. And it's leveraging some of the opportunities that we've shown with the updates to the frontage protection zone. That first 30-foot where you require trail connectivity, you can consider that a really high-quality signature trail. We're showing here on Kearns, on Park, and on Deer Valley Drive, where the frontage protection zone are currently there. But there's also opportunities along the alignment with Short Line Road and Homestake Road to create an additional north-south and east-west connection. And second, we have to invest in sidewalks. You know, every great walkable neighborhood begins at the sidewalk level, and the sidewalk gaps that are in the neighborhood must be addressed. Some of them already are being addressed, like improvements to Homestake Road and Munchkin Road, but things like filling the sidewalk gaps on Iron Horse Drive, those are key priorities as we continue improving the neighborhood. Second, you know, some of you all saw the slides on how the history of Bonanza Park, how it developed through rail lines, things like the circus, you know, a dump. All of these things come together and really give us the block system that we have today. When you compound that with auto-oriented uses, you have a lot of super block development. And by super block, it's just a really big block that unless you're a car, it's really hard to move through. As new development comes in, there's opportunities to add some new internal road connections within the neighborhood that are more for local through traffic, and you know, give us an opportunity to create a more walkable and connected block system. But you can also think through this future development to leverage some of these improvements. All of the things that I've shown right now, they're pretty costly. They're things that most cities do not do by themselves. They have partnerships, they think through development standards, and they really work with the private market to make some of this happen. There are many, many ways to do that, but some of it is you know, as you apply for a development bonus, there's some cities do improvement funds. Developers can either contribute to them or make the improvement themselves, but it includes things like, you know, traffic calming at intersections, improving crosswalks, improving transit connections, and even making connections to surrounding neighborhoods. And lastly, on the connectivity side is, you know, a walkable and pedestrian-oriented neighborhood leaves very little room for things like, you know, drive-throughs or things with large parking lots. Even those things that are currently there, they'll still be there, but as things redevelop, we want to make sure we encourage that mixed-use vision that you all told us you'd like to see. So what are some opportunities for that? On a zoning level, you can restrict car-centric uses, so you can remove things like auto-related retail or drive-up windows. You can lower your parking minimums when it's appropriate and when there are mixed-use developments that allow for it. And you can incentivize underground parking by making it a community benefit in your zoning district, or you can work with the development community through a parking reduction. There are many ways that folks do parking reduction across the country, one of which is, you know, thinking through the types of complementary uses that come into a development and then adding some percentages for what our appropriate parking reduction is if there's a kind of a management plan behind it. And lastly, these are really big ideas, but you know, you all deal with traffic today. You all understand how the neighborhood works. And as part of this process, we also included a traffic model to understand the impact of growth and development here. So for that, I'm going to pass it over to Maria from Fair and Pierce to share some of that.
Thanks, Luis. Oh,
sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so there's been some discussion already, some mention of trade-offs. I think traffic is going to be one of the things that it's important to think about as a trade-off for this. So what we were assuming as the basis for our traffic model, and if you're not familiar with traffic models, these are things that are looking really at intersections, at signalized intersections, at unsignalized intersections, and thinking about in the current day and in the future, how much time are people going to have to spend waiting at each one of these signals? And those are usually ranked on a score of A to F, much like school. A is good, F is not so good. So we took the information from the land use plans that Luis and his team had put together and kind of calculated in, well, we've got this much residential, we've got this much commercial, hotel, let's see, restaurants, the arts and culture uses, lots of different things in there, right? That are all interacting together to contribute to traffic coming to the site, leaving the site at different times a day. So we were kind of going with those assumptions, and then we also wanted to account for, in the future, the amount of traffic that's moving around on Kearns, on Park, on Bonanza, that's occurring, and it's generated from places outside this area. For that, we use what's called the travel demand model, which is, we're getting a little wonky, but that's a tool that's developed and maintained by Summit County that has projections about, you know, where all different kinds of growth is going to go, what it's going to look like, how many people, how many jobs are going to be involved in that development. So working with that analysis, so the slide that's on the, is there a thing here? I don't know. The thing that says 2023 on the top is your existing conditions. And so the dots, you know, the greener they are, the better the level of service, the redder they are, the worse. So you can see in 2023, at a lot of different intersections, we had some that were okay, some that are not looking so good, a few intersections along Bonanza, a couple on Park Ave that are already reaching level of service F. I want to point out a couple of things. So first of all, this is for the PM peak hour. In our traffic model, so what we did is we gathered a lot of traffic data at intersections to see what's the busiest time of day. And the busiest day of the year typically that we model based on city standards is the Friday of President's Day weekend. So it's not like it's the World Cup or the Olympics, but it's pretty busy. It's a pretty busy time for Park City. So we wanted to see, what are conditions like in the current year. At this point, it was 2023 for that particular day, and then projecting future conditions out, stuff that's on the site, plus stuff that's happening in other parts of Park City in the region that's coming to the site. And so you can kind of see with the maps and on the table that's shown here where that level of service really starts to decline. I can understand that this might raise some concern in folks. Come talk to me in the map room afterwards, and I'll try to explain what this is. And there's some different knobs and levers we can pull to try to mitigate some of this, so let's talk about it. But you can generally see, particularly along 224, Park Ave, as you call it, and Bonanza Drive especially, you've got a lot of intersections that are now going to a level of service F. That's mostly a function of all the development that's proposed within the site plan here. It's quite a bit, and you'll be able to see some details when you move into the other room in terms of number of uses, et cetera. But that's really what's contributing to this. So you've got some that are kind of in bad shape already. It's really the amount of development that's proposed here that's going to kind of push those over the edges. But that's, for one thing, it's a trade-off. So you do get some wonderful things in exchange for accepting some of these conditions for the peak hour of the day on the worst day of the year. So that's something to think about. There are some other things that we can do that will help this somewhat. So for one thing, the city and UDOT have an agreement that will allow a new signal on 248 and Homestake, so that'll help a little bit. Another possibility would be to add a signal at Bonanza and Iron Horse. One of the problems with the side streets in particular, so like Iron Horse, Homestake, Prospector, is that people won't be able to make left turns out. I think it's probably difficult right now to make left turns out of some of those side streets. That'll get more difficult. And so adding something like a signal at Iron Horse will provide some gaps in traffic, so people that are on some of those side streets might be able to get out a little bit more easily. We're also looking at potentially some turn restrictions. So a lot of those Fs that are coming out onto Kearns into Park Ave are people that are, again, trying to make left turns out onto Park Ave or onto Kearns from Sidewinder or from Iron Horse in the future, and there's just not enough gaps in the traffic for them to be able to do that. So restricting those left turns would make them go to a different location to try to get to where they need to go. So those are some possibilities. We have not modeled those yet, but we will be in the future to see what kind of impact those have. There's also this list of different kind of transportation demand management options that you can do. I think Luis has talked about some of these already, but like, for example, one would be, I think it's on here somewhere, unbundling parking. And what that means is that when people buy, a housing unit, or when they sign up for a lease in an office space or a retail space, it doesn't automatically come with assigned parking. They would have to pay more for that. That would, in some cases, disincentivize people from bringing cars to the site at all. So that would be one way to potentially reduce people driving to the site and try to just bring those numbers down a bit. Regional satellite parking is another one, and I think Summit County is studying the possibility of establishing more parking lots that are outside city limits, that are intended for people that are coming into the area from outside to park, get on transit, and then come to these places and interact with the community in a way that doesn't involve bringing their car there. So if you have concerns, come talk to me. We can talk through how this works and talk through options for further mitigation. I'll pass it back to Luis or Andy.
To me. All right. Hey, everybody. I get to take us through the home stretch here. We've made it through 3 goals. We've got 3 more that we're going to cover. These are a little quicker, because we're excited about getting to the back tables here soon. All of this content that you've seen to this point is going to be covered in the tables back here. Hopefully you all have a lot to say and a lot to share, and we look forward to hearing that feedback. The 4th goal that I want to share is inclusive. Of course, we want all of Park City, in every sense of the word, to be an inclusive city. What we mean for this particular study is talking about affordability and affordable housing in particular. for both the units themselves and then, of course, workforce, the people that work here. We want people that work here to be able to afford to live in Park City and within Bonanza Park. So what is affordability? We're throwing a lot of kind of planning lingo at you all tonight, but we also wanted to make sure you're understanding what we're saying. So in terms of affordability, it's different in different cities and it's different in different states. The state of Utah defines moderate income as equal to 80% of the area median income. And so Park City itself, the inclusionary housing ordinance requires master plan developments provide affordable units for 20% of the residential units. Right now, Park City as a whole is meeting that percentage, but as new units become online, if we don't think about affordable housing, that percentage is going to continue to go down. So we've got to continue to think about affordable units in all the developments that we're suggesting could happen in Bonanza Park, and setting the stage for that to continue to happen so that this area is also affordable for a variety of various incomes. So the three initiatives for inclusion, talk about working with the development community. I think Luis has covered some of this and some of the previous goals. How do we incentivize affordable housing within developments? Working with development agreements, public-private partnerships, encouraging different types of unit sizes, establishing bold affordability metrics. We talked about that 20% mark. What are some of the metrics, and set targets for how affordable and workforce units should be built in Bonanza Park? And then also work with residents and property owners to preserve naturally occurring moderate income housing. Actually, the largest percentage of affordable housing occurs in Bonanza Park right now, so we want to continue to encourage that and hold on to what's there. Just some case studies just to show. I think the Engine House is a really great example. Another example that we brought to the table is the Martha from Boise, Idaho. Really great example of a 3-story integrate public art. It's got open space. It's got a lot of the ingredients that we've been talking about in terms of incentives. And it covers a range between 60% to 120% for the affordability from the area median income. The 5th goal is green. So Luis showed a few different examples from an incentive perspective for developers. We've also heard a lot about green space, open space, the need for that within this area. And so we want to start to promote that within the development. So as development occurs, we're thinking about green space. We're thinking about connectivity to other green spaces. Rail to trail, how do we begin to connect that greenway through the site as well? So that we ensure that all current and future Bonanza Park residents are within a safe and comfortable 10-minute walk to a park or an outdoor community space or a trail connection. We also want to provide examples of publicly accessible green spaces and outdoor community spaces. So areas for the community to come together to support community. Not just a green space for the particular development, but one that contributes and brings people together. And then also incentivize sustainable development. So we're talking about net zero, we're talking about smart building, smart development with the materials that we use, the energy that we consume. So G1, talking about access to parks. If anybody's not familiar with Trust for Public Land, it's a really great web resource. They're a national group that takes statistics on access to green space and parks across the country. They've also got some information about Park City as well. There's an area within this study that is an area of high park need. So there's that as a metric that we can understand. It's also an opportunity for developers who begin to develop to provide that outdoor green space and community outdoor spaces. And also create that within the heart of Bonanza Park. And also focus on trails and pedestrian connections and linkages. That's also important, that walkability that we've been talking about. Publicly accessible green spaces. These can come in a number of different forms, from urban plazas to those terraces that we were talking about if they're step backs, to community gardens, pocket parks. Again, those opportunities for people to come together at different scales, whether it's a big, broad outdoor concert venue, or if it's an opportunity for a community to come together and plant vegetables. And then sustainable development. We talked about incentives for new buildings in Bonanza Park to be designed and built to the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. Incentives for developments to include sustainable features like green roofs and green infrastructure. And then also support transit in Bonanza Park, taking the dependency off the vehicle, lowering the carbon emissions, and starting to use more public transit and non-motorized options. And then lastly, goal 6 is cultural. This is where we weave arts and culture into the community fabric. So we've got 2 recommendations here. Use public art and placemaking elements, and then also ensure that public art is meaningfully incorporated into future development. So for example, we could allow art installations within the frontage protection zone. We could also incorporate public art into streetscapes. An example here of an intersection with some bump outs, doing something artful there to create a space not only for vehicles to stop and organize themselves, but also for people to occupy. The greenways that we've got, rail to trail, for example, are there opportunities for gateways, art installations, work with Summit County and Park City Arts Council to enliven the rail trail. And then also make public art part of the core, one of the core development principles, that we encourage developers to incorporate art as a part of their development. So we can require public art, local art to be incorporated into master plan developments, require that community outdoor spaces created as part of a new development include public art, and incorporate murals, super graphics, and color to break up building facades. There's just some examples. There's some others as well. But the inclusion of public art is the expression of local. So a lot of these goals begin to tie into one another and really begin to overlap, and there's the thread that weaves together. So that was goal 6. So next steps for us after tonight, after we collect information from you all, have discussions, which we're really looking forward to, we're going to refine these draft recommendations into a land use framework plan for Bonanza Park. So what we hear tonight is going to help inform that draft. We're going to craft a standalone connectivity framework. And then we're going to share the final materials with Planning Commission and the City Council. That date is yet to be set, but we're looking fairly soon for that to happen. So thank you all very much for attending tonight. This is the first half. The second half, back through the doors. We look forward to seeing you all. We've got all of these goals set up, all this data. Please come and have a conversation with us. We look forward to it. Thank you very much.